Warning, spoilers for KH3 and the Remind DLC are ahead. If you don't want spoilers, stop watching now. Kingdom Hearts 3 was a divisive game when it came out. Riding on the coattails of KH2, one of the better action RPGs ever made, was a tall order for the game, and the partial development hell and production by a different team certainly didn't help. The game has its fans, and it had certainly received the most positive praise out of the KH Osaka team games, but the majority of the vocal KH fanbase seemed mixed. After the secret ending of base KH3, most people were expecting some DLC to help explain some questions from the main game, and to add some content to the game, as Kingdom Hearts 3's post-game was a bit light. Lo and behold, out comes Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. The story of Remind covers how Sora went back to save Kairi at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3, and where he ends up after that, likely leading directly into the next game. I won't be covering much of the story today, but I felt it added a lot of valuable information to what was arguably the best part of the game, and giving us some new sequences and the chance to play as some other characters felt really satisfying, even if they were a bit underpowered compared to Sora. In addition to the story add-on content, we were also given the Limitcut episode. This is the return of the data battles from KH2 Final Mix. 13 bosses with, according to Nomura, their limit removed, hence the name Limitcut. The Limitcut episode has us facing off with the real Organization 13 in one-on-one redesigned fights, and are harder than anything else in the game up to this point. Compared to base KH3's Dark Inferno, these are brutal. The difficulty and design of these fights vary wildly, so I wanted to take some time to both analyze and rank these bosses, as they're really interesting to fight and offer some very unique challenges. As a word of note, I am not a Kingdom Hearts 3 speedrunner. I wasn't playing the game on Critical, this was level 99 standard, but I do feel I have a good enough grasp of the game to give a solid analysis on these bosses' interesting mechanics. This list will go from easiest to hardest and is entirely based on my opinions and experience. Your mileage may vary greatly, but I hope to provide some insight on the design and difficulty of these fights, so let's get started. When referring to Kingdom Hearts bosses, generally speaking, they operate off of two mechanics other than their standard attacks. First is revenge value, which is a sort of internal counter to prevent the player from stun-locking the boss into an infinite combo. Basically, once you hit the boss too much, they'll force themselves out of your combo and begin to attack again. The second is desperation move, or DM. This generally just refers to the super attacks most Kingdom Hearts bosses use after they've lost a certain amount of health. I'll be referring to both of these concepts occasionally, so it's good to know what these mean. Number 13, Luxord. Luxord, similarly to the data battles from KH2, is a gimmick fight. Instead of a health bar, he has a time gauge. Sora also has a time gauge, but you have to worry about his health as well. If either your time gauge or your health bar hits 0, you die. If you're using healing and items, the time gauge will deplete before your health does, forcing you to learn how to appropriately deal with every attack, whether puzzle or not. Thematically, the fight fits Luxord's card gimmick well. I always enjoy a good puzzle fight. The one kind of disappointing thing, however, is that most of the puzzle attacks are very easy, and most of his regular attacks are very reactable. By the end of the second or third attempt, you'll have likely seen every attack he has minus his DM. Sadly, his DM is also very simple. It just involves attacking the cards that have Luxord on them, and even if you fail the last section of the DM, if you have enough health, you'll simply survive and go back to the easy-to-punish attacks. So essentially, this boss becomes not a threat after very few attempts, just making him feel like a cakewalk. Also, some of the bosses in this DLC have a forced desperation move at the end of their fights, and Luxord doesn't, which I was actually a little bit disappointed by. He feels like the one character that would have one last trick up his sleeve. Overall, a good fight, but not one you'll feel the need to do again, as it's very easy. Number 12, Larxene. Larxene is a flurry at first, with very fast attacks, but they are easily learned. Many of her combo strings end in the same opening, so it'll be burned into your brain really fast. By the time you've fought her a few times, the only wall you'll have is her DM. Her DM is easily the hardest part of her fight, with you having to manage her clones so that she unleashes less attacks during each phase. It can be pretty punishing, and it's kind of a long DM, so if you're really struggling, you might need well-timed heals or form spam to get through it, but once you're through it, it goes back to the same few attacks so you can get those same punishes in. It's a pretty unnotable fight in my opinion. I didn't really feel like doing it again because I found her DM pretty unfun to deal with. Number 11, Young Xehanort. Young Xehanort is possibly the most straightforward fight in the whole set. Most of his attacks are one-on-one combo strings that you just have to learn how to block. While at first his attacks can be tricky to learn, many of them result in dodge prompts allowing you to get higher damage than a normal punish. His DM is very cool visually. He splits himself into clones and flings various attacks at you, and you have to wait for the real one to appear to take down his armor and knock him out of his DM. One thing that does kind of suck though is that at least on the base PS4, this DM takes the frame rate straight down to 30 FPS, which can be jarring when most of the game is at 60. This fight inches out Larxene difficulty-wise because his second phase after the DM does change his attacks, and it can take some time to figure out his new moves. He ends with the Desperation move at 1 health, and it's a harder version of his base DM. Once again, you might need some form or magic spam to get through it and get the hits required to get his armor bar down, as the final DM is a lot more of an onslaught compared to the first version. Overall, a very straightforward fight, and probably a good example of a basic data battle, so I would probably suggest people start with young Xehanort. Number 10. Ansem. My perspective on Ansem is interesting because I fought Ansem after Dark Riku, but Ansem is basically an easier version of Dark Riku. While we'll get to Dark Riku later, comparing the two, he just has slower, less punishing attacks and less attacks in general. Most of his attacks don't really do a whole lot of damage at all, so it can be easy to just scrape yourself through the fight even if the actual openings can be a little hard to find. Once again, his DM is easily the hardest part of the fight, but once you learn how to deal with his orb attacks, he actually has some openings during the DM, allow you to continue to punish while managing it. It's a pretty fun fight, but it's basically a baby version of Dark Riku. If you already beat Dark Riku, you can easily roll over Ansem. Number 9. Xigbar. In my opinion, this is where the fights start to get pretty challenging. Xigbar is a bit different of a fight as he focuses almost entirely on projectile and ranged attacks. It's up to the player to deal with the many different projectile attacks while closing the gap to get hits in on Xigbar. After the first few tries, you'll have seen every projectile attack he can use, but he'll start mixing up and combining each attack differently, requiring some further learning to get down. Occasionally, you'll have the chance to use the Showdown Situation command and have a one-on-one Wild Wild West quick draw with Xigbar to get an opening. Xigbar also messes with the stage, sometimes turning it into a giant ring and sometimes turning it into a small stage to use for his DM. I like the stage changes, it makes you think a little bit more than when you're dealing with the standard circle stage. It's a pretty fun fight overall. Number 8. Terra Xehanort. Another pretty straightforward fight, modified only by the presence of the Guardian, who does many of Terra Xehanort's attacks for him. However, it's almost always either one or the other, so it doesn't ever really feel too overwhelming. His DM isn't the worst thing, but it can do a lot of damage if you're having trouble dodging the lightning. Terra himself has some interesting punishes, like an attack that can only be punished if you block it in the air and not on the ground. I'm a big fan of stuff like that. His DM is powered up in the second phase, and it can be pretty tricky as it's the only part where you have to deal with Guardian and Terra at the same time. It's a straightforward, fun, not too bad fight that I definitely enjoy. Number 7. Xion. Xion's fight is just goddamn spectacular. Amazing music and theming, fun attacks to deal with managing, interesting and unique openings, and an amazing DM to boot. It's probably my favorite fight out of the bunch. Her attacks can be hard to deal with, but some of them result in dodge prompts for extra damage, which is probably the one thing that keeps this fight lower on this list for me. You can get a lot of damage in on some punishes. Xion introduces a mechanic 3 bosses in this DLC use, which is attacks that take away your max health. They'll gladly take your health all the way down to 1 HP as well. The only way to get it back is to either use an elixir or a form change, or to just wait it out. It really makes you rethink form usage when you're learning the fights, as you might need the form changes for defense rather than offense. Xion's DM is very punishing, and if you're not managing the lasers properly, you can have your health taken down to 1 very quickly. She has an armor bar you can deplete, but I usually just went with trying to survive it. Overall, an extremely fun fight, and I loved doing it again after I'd beaten it. One of the best fights in the DLC for sure. Number 6. Xemnas. The Xemnas fight can be summed up with one word. While most of his attacks and patterns aren't too difficult, the main difficulty of the fight is dealing with his vines that push you around. The vines don't do any damage, but they often smash you into walls Xemnas has put up or put you in a position for another attack from Xemnas. It can be very difficult to deal with, though once you're able to get used to it, you can actually get a lot of punishes off of dodging the vines. The vines reach their peak during his DM, where he constantly moves you around and follows with an attack, only to push you with the vines again immediately. It's definitely a struggle to deal with his DM, and if you get hit by the laser dome, there's a good chance you're dead the next time he attacks. In the second phase, he tightens up, following up his attacks that have openings with other attacks even faster. It's a good fight, but not one I loved doing. I found the vines pushing me around to be a bit annoying. Number 5. Marluxia. Now we're in tough territory. Marluxia has difficult to read attacks, some with unblockables and short openings, making this boss pretty tough to learn. The main attraction in this fight is Marluxia's DM, which you'll see quite a few times throughout the fight. The first time the DM is used, you'll get the trademark Doom counter, this time being a timer that counts down. If you can't get him to end the DM before the timer is up, you're dead. You basically need certain finishers or fire magic if you want to get him down. Even if it's a bit tough for a DM, it's one of the most visually impressive and flashy DMs. It's honestly spectacular. His second phase is really just a marathon, with extremely fast, punishing combos and unblockables that will push and pull you all over the stage while you try to get your bearings. Marluxia also has a final DM, with the Doom counter being set to 99. I personally needed magic to get this done, as he basically constantly attacks until the timer is at about 10 seconds, so you'll need something to remove that armor bar very quickly, otherwise you're doing the whole fight over again. Marluxia for me probably has the highest disparity of hard fight I don't want to redo. Being moved around the arena forcibly just feels like you're walking upstream in a river. Number 4, Dark Riku. Hey Riku, you okay?
You like it? I'm done with you! Later! I'm unstoppable!
Man, he yells a lot. Dark Riku is a fucking onslaught. He constantly attacks and puts stuff down that fills the screen with hitboxes, and it can be extremely overwhelming at first. Even once you start getting some of the punishes down, you can be straight up denied your combo by unblockable lightning RNG. It's a mean fight, complemented by a really mean DM. If you get hit at all during the start of the DM, you can kiss your ass goodbye. You're gonna be comboed to the moon. A big part of learning the fight is just figuring out how to survive the DM. You'll have to deal with it a few times, so learning to dodge it successfully is very important. This is another fight that I feel has a very unique and satisfying opening. Throughout the fight, Riku will flash his Reflect Shield, indicating that you can't hit him. There are certain places where, if you hit the Reflect Shield, he'll keep it up instead of flashing it. If you get to this state, then dodge the Reflect popping open, you can get an opening. It's easily one of the most satisfying openings in the whole fight. Overall, it's a fun fight to do a second time, but at first it can really feel like a mess. Number 3, Vanitas. Vanitas is particularly brutal. In my time playing, it was the fight that took me the longest to beat, about 2 hours of straight attempts. His difficult strings and punishing openings make him a tricky fight to learn, only to run straight into his DM. His DM is a bit tough to read, and the telegraphs are very tricky in addition to it being a very punishing DM. There's a good chance that once you get hit, you're going to get hit a few more times before you recover, without using healing or form spam. In addition, he really tightens up after his DM, meaning you have to be faster with your already tight punishes. He's pretty much the epitome of high risk, high reward, as he has a few attacks that give the dodge prompt if blocked, but if he hits you with those, there's a good chance you're either dead or going down to 1 HP. It's not the worst fight in hindsight. I definitely enjoyed it more the second time. It can just be a generally difficult fight to adapt to. Number 2, Master Xehanort. The final boss of the Limitcut episode is a brutal mess at first. Every combo is liable to take you down to 1 HP, reduce your max health bar, or just straight up kill you. Definitely one of the hardest to learn, but also one of the most satisfying. Some of his entire attacks can be avoided by finding certain openings, but before finding those, they are attacks that you'll be lucky to survive, like his Grand Magic attack. Honestly, at first, it feels more overwhelming than Dark Riku, but mostly because the attacks are extremely punishing. Even once you've got all the openings down, the DM is a fight for survival, being a long onslaught of rapid attacks, unblockables, and health-draining combos. It's a difficult execution fight, which makes learning it both one of the best and hardest DLC fights. Number 1, Saïx. And here at the top of the list we have Saïx. Saïx is another onslaught style fight like Dark Riku, but turned up to the max. The idea of the fight is based around the Berserk meter, which when active means that Saïx will be doing his DM. This makes the fight difficult, as it is essentially a fight based around fighting a character that is constantly in his DM, trying to find openings in difficult to dodge, punishing attacks. You definitely have to be careful when he starts the DM as well, because if you don't dodge the first few attacks, he'll put you in the one place you don't want to be in Kingdom Hearts 3. The fucking sky. However, in hindsight, it's kind of an awesome fight. Almost every attack he uses has an opening if you can figure it out. The second time I fought him, I found 2 or 3 openings I didn't see the first time. There's even some easier openings you can take by using Blizzard that will help you get through it the first few times. Saïx tightens up in the second phase, but almost all of his attacks still have a version with the opening. It's a hard fight, but going back to it was one of my favorite of the whole DLC. It really felt like I could take him on in my own way since so many of his attacks have openings. So those are the KH3 data battles, ranked in order of difficulty in my opinion. Overall, even though I didn't want to redo some of the fights, I found the general design of these fights to be fantastic, and I had a great time going through them. There's one notable boss I left out here, Big Daddy Yozora. I didn't include him in the main list because 1, he's not technically in the Limitcut episode, and 2, he is without a doubt the hardest boss in the game. Let's take a quick look at Yozora to finish this list out. Yozora is pretty brutal. Compared to the 2 hours Vanitas took me, Yozora took 6, it wasn't even close. Brutally punishing attacks like the Keyblade steal that ends in forced damage, and a vortex where Yozora is liable to steal 3 items straight out of your inventory makes survivability a huge challenge in this fight. It took me about 2 hours to even see his DM once, which is a 4-phase marathon in itself. It starts out with some attacks previewing the moves seen in Phase 2, featuring some warp attacks and laser blocking and dodging. Then a phase where the Verum Rex mechs dive you, leaving you to either take them out or dodge them as much as you can. This is followed up by the hardest phase of the DM, featuring attacks from Yozora and his clones. This attack can put you down quick if you aren't able to block the first few. Finally, it ends with a suction attack that brings you into an orb before starting Phase 2. It can take a lot of work to learn how to survive this DM. Luckily, there are ways to shorten it, and some of it can be learned pretty quickly once you're getting to the DM consistently. After that, it's a matter of adapting to the second phase and getting through the DM consistently. Personally, I felt like the item steal attack was a bit much, especially since it healed Yozora and it felt like it was extending the length of the fight a lot. After beating him, I felt like I didn't really want to do the fight again anytime soon. However, when I went back to fight him again for footage, I found myself really enjoying it again and actually beat him again. I think it's a really well-designed and fun fight, even if learning it can be frustrating. I really think they did a great job with this super boss. Overall, the Remind DLC has brought my opinion from mixed to positive on KH3 as a whole. It's got me wanting to play the game again outside of the DLC as well. The story touch-ups were nice, the bosses were really fun, and I think it really addressed a lot of the complaints players had. I would highly recommend the DLC to anyone who got some enjoyment out of Kingdom Hearts 3. And now that I'm done telling you about difficult content in a video game, I'm going to tell you about difficult content in a video game that I'm going to suffer through live for your amusement. Starting the day after this video goes up, I'll be doing the self-proclaimed Kingdom Hearts 3 Heaven or Hell Challenge. This involves 2 mods from the premium menu, one that allows Sora to one-shot all enemies, and one that sets the entire party's defense to 0. This, combined with critical mode, effectively creates Heaven or Hell mode a la Devil May Cry. 2 PM CST on weekends and 7 PM CST on Mondays are the times I'll be working my way through this challenge. In addition, the new Final Fantasy XIV raid tier has just started at the time of this video's release, and I'm streaming all of our group's progression through it on Tuesday through Thursday at 7 PM CST. So stop by if you're interested in seeing me suffer through some hard content and laugh at my expense. Thanks for watching. Check out my Twitter and my Twitch, links are in the description below. You can also check out my Patreon if you want to support my content. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.